giving a karakia. So here we go. Te whakaaetanga e, te whakaaetanga e, tēnei te kaupapa ka ea, tēnei te wānanga ka ea, te Māori o te kaupapa ka whakamoia, te Māori o te wānanga ka whakamoia. Koa ki runga, koa ki raro. Humie, huie, tai kie. Now, just so you know what that means, it means the following. It is completed. It is done. We have achieved our purpose, completed our forum. Let the purpose of our gathering rest for now. Let the vitality of our discussions replenish. We depart with fulfilled hearts and minds, bonded in our common goal and unity. So I want to welcome you all to tonight's presentation. Kaylin is going to be taking us through a presentation around digital badging and gamification, the neuroscience of incentives. And I just want to, first of all, just a little bit of housekeeping. So we will be using the chat tonight. So if you do have questions that you'd like to ask, just pop it in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that and having a look at that. But can I also just ask that you make sure that you are on mute, just so we don't have any background noise as we go through. Lastly, we are recording this session, and there is some slides and some information that Kaylin will be putting up. He'll be putting up a link, but I'll also send out the slides as well after we finish tonight's presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Kaylin now.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everybody. My name's Kaylin Huntress, and I'm in Oamaru on the South Island of New Zealand. And I'd like to know where you are. So go ahead and type it in the chat box and let me know, where are you right now? I know we've got people all across the country in a lot of different places. We've got some Wellington, some Lower Hutt, Napier. It's great over there. Taupo, Christchurch, Pitoone. Yes, indeed. East Auckland and Porirua. Wonderful. Well, thank you for coming to meet with me in this virtual space from across Aotearoa. And I'm really happy to be spending some time with you today talking about how to make an engaging experience. Because that's really what we want out of a learner experience, right? We have this brief window of time where we can improve someone. And if we can get into their heads and have them take actions that improve themselves, then we have a higher likelihood of improving them again in the future. But if we give them a bad experience and it's boring and they don't like it and they feel frustrated, then they're going to feel that way in the future. You know, it's like the legend of the boy who cried wolf. If it's boring the first time I come and learn something, then why should I come again if it's not going to be any fun next time? So I've seen this a lot in my work as a digital marketer and as a learning designer. I've worked with the world's largest credentialing organization, and I spend a lot of time working with independent entrepreneurs and experts on helping them convert their intellectual property into a curriculum. And so I spend a lot of time looking at the journey that a student or a customer takes from where they start their journey in the world of the common day when they're dealing with a specific set of problems to the end of their journey, when they have some result that we want to guide them to. And my gift is seeing that system from start to finish and all the different pieces along that journey. And it allows me to see common patterns in journeys. Patterns that happen in small journeys with buying something on an e-commerce website, and large journeys with going through a curriculum to earn a credential. And so a lot of my work that I do with my digital marketing agency, Stellar Platforms, is in auditing these kinds of journeys from start to finish so that I can make targeted recommendations on how to improve this journey based on cutting-edge digital marketing and learning design techniques. And my hope for you today in this presentation on digital badging and gamification is to share an idea with you that you can use to improve the journeys of your students and customers and employees. Because if you can improve the experience that someone has when they're learning from you, then they're going to want to come back and learn from you in the future. So what I'd like to know is, what's the difference between a test and a game? Type it in the chat box. Take a moment to tell me the difference between a test and a game. Well, let me get my slides back for a second. And let's take about 30 seconds and write down 5 different distinctions between a test and a game. How can you tell them apart? What's different? It up in 3, 2, and 1. Great. Tests are boring. Games are fun. The anxiety level. Yeah. Is it an assessment? Is it in a formal setting? Yeah, these are really good distinctions. But I want to offer something that's a little clearer. Which do you fail more often? Type it in the chat box and let me know, which do you fail more often? Do you fail a game more often or a test more often? See some tests, see some games. Yeah, it's about evenly divided in the room. Well, there's this phenomenon that's come across YouTube recently known as the Super Mario effect. And the Super Mario effect was described by Mark Rober, who's a science YouTuber of some renown. And he gave a TED talk on this a number of years ago. And he talked about how playing Super Mario was actually a really boring set of mechanical functions. You have to hold these buttons in this order for different periods of time. And if you asked somebody to just hit these buttons in this order, it would be really boring. But when those buttons control a plumber who's saving a princess and pounding on monsters and dodging spinning turtle shells, suddenly it's a game. People lose Super Mario much more often than they win. But you don't focus on those losses. The Super Mario effect, Mark Rober says, is when you begin to focus on the princess and not the pits. You stick with a task and you learn more. And he ran this really interesting experiment where he had a simple coding problem, and he said, hey, who can solve this problem? And it had loops and some if-then statements, and it was to move a car through this grid without hitting any obstacles. And he had 2 versions of this. He A/B tested it. And the only difference was whether or not he showed progress, whether he docked points or not. And these gamification techniques gave him some really interesting results. The link to this TED Talk is here in the slides, and I'll give you a way to get the slides at the end of this presentation. But what was so interesting about this experiment is that he found that failure can feed learning if it's fun. If you don't feel like you're being punished for making mistakes, then mistakes can actually become part of the learning process. Being comfortable with repetitive failure, it allows you to stay deep in the learning process. And that's how you get to mastery. Mastery doesn't come from doing something perfectly again and again. Mastery comes from knowing all of the possible permutations of failure. So creating an environment where we can enjoy failure, it gives us access to a much deeper level of knowledge. There was a study done by BBC Horizon a few years ago, and they went into some retired nursing facilities where retirees were living out their twilight years. And they had them play a go-kart game for 15 hours over 5 weeks. And they would just drive this little go-kart around for a couple of hours a week. And what they found was that at the end of 5 weeks, everyone who took part in this study had a 30% higher working attention span. Their cognitive load was increased because of what Dr. Edward Hallowell found when he was studying ADHD patients and how they learn. And he found that in order to create a motivating situation for people to learn, it has to be highly structured and full of variety and novelty. That highly structured environment, those are the rules of a game. And by creating a structured environment where people can learn, then we can inspire them to keep learning even through failure. So I'm going to share a concept with you to illustrate the difference between a test and a game. I mean, can you see this screen that I have here with this smiley face? Give me a thumbs up if you can see that smiley face. Yeah, great. Okay. So with a test, you either pass or you fail. Those are the two options. You can pass or fail a test. And with a game, you can either win or you can lose. And so if we look at these two options, we get a grid. And unfortunately, my handwriting is not that good, so I'm going to use this neat little feature right here to have it convert my handwriting into text, which is going to be fun. When you fail and you lose, that's when you quit. Game over. We're done. You can't even get through it. And this is where about half of our learners go, is they fail, they lose, and they think, oh, I don't want to do this. Now, you can fail and win, and that's what happens when you cheat. Because cheaters can win the game, but they fail in actually learning what we're trying to teach them. If you pass and you lose, that's when you just lose a life. Because losing is a natural part of playing a game. You're actually passing the process as you lose. When you pass and you win, this is surprising, it's game over. When you save the princess, there's no more monsters to defeat. The game's done. You stop playing the game and go back to your life. And the same thing happens with our learning experiences. When someone gets the credential, it's game over. It's time for them to take their rewards and move on. Rewards are one of the incentives that we're going to be talking about today. And as we go through this presentation, I'm going to encourage you to take notes. So get a notebook nearby. If you like Post-it notes or index cards, we're going to be making some lists of 5. You can feel free to take notes in the chat box and share your notes with others. That's always a great thing. But if you'd like to take notes yourself, go ahead and get yourself set up so that you have your note apparatus handy. These are the 5 incentives that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about chapters, experience points, leveling up, badges, and leaderboards. Every one of these incentives corresponds to a hormone in our brains. Oxytocin is known as the love hormone or the cuddle hormone, and it's how we feel empathy. When you're snuggling with your dog or with a baby, that's when you naturally create oxytocin. It creates empathy and bonding with others. Cortisol is known as the stress hormone. When you feel cortisol, that's when you go into fight or flight. When all of a sudden your heart rate is elevated and you pay a lot more attention to the things that are around you. Endorphins are the natural pain reliever in the body. We feel endorphins a lot in periods of exercise and ecstatic states. Badges correspond to the reward hormone, which is dopamine. And the reward hormone is activated anytime we get a satisfactory result that we want to repeat. And this final hormone is actually also a neurotransmitter. It's called serotonin. It's the happy hormone. It's where we feel balance and where we feel completion. And each one of these hormones corresponds to an emotion that we feel. When you're creating oxytocin, that's when you feel empathy and understanding for others. When you feel cortisol, that's when you pay attention. That's what stress is for, is to bring us fully into the present moment. Endorphins create the emotion of euphoria, where you feel ready to do anything. Dopamine gives us that satisfaction of reward, and serotonin creates feeling of balance. All 5 of these emotions they match the 5-act structure perfectly. The 5-act structure was created by Gustav Freytag in 1843, and he defined this 5-act narrative arc that was present in every story that was told within a set period of time. A lot of times this was live theatrical performances that they went through a 5-act structure of exposition, where you set the scene, the rising action, where the stakes are heightened, the climax, which is the final battle, the falling action, when justice is dispensed and rewards are given, and then the denouement, the resolution. And these 5 stages of storytelling are hardwired into our minds. The reason why we've been sharing stories around the campfire for thousands of generations is because we're accustomed to feeling these 5 emotions in this order. So I'm going to be sharing these 5 neurochemicals and these 5 incentives in this order, in the hopes that you'll be able to upgrade your own learning experiences using these techniques. And so first, let's take a look at chapters. The chapters are how we divide a longer journey into a series of short, achievable steps. No video game or no movie, no story starts and says, okay, we're going to watch Harry Potter. It'll be 20 hours of feature film. It's a little daunting, right? But if I say we're going to watch the first episode of Harry Potter and it'll be a few hours long, and then after that, we'll watch the second episode of Harry Potter, and that'll be another few hours, especially at the beginning of the journey. You don't want to paint the whole picture. You want to identify the next milestone. Defining a journey from start to finish, it creates a map for someone to follow. And it helps orient them to their current location, and it provides direction when they get lost. This map is really critical when you're starting out on a journey because it's so daunting to get all the way to the end. That's why the creation of sub-goals is so helpful in the very beginning. A lot of times a video game will open with a title sequence. You don't even have to do anything. You just watch and you get empathy with the characters. You learn about their world and their problems, and that exposition draws you in. You're creating oxytocin and you're thinking, wow, these are some big problems. But you don't fight the boss next. You do a little tutorial and you learn how to move your character around and how to pick something up and put it down and what the buttons mean. And that's the whole second chapter, just learning to move around your character. Achieving that goal of being able to move your character is what unlocks future chapters. And you can't get to those chapters until you complete those sub-goals. There was a study done by Stanford Business School, and they studied sub-goals in terms of how effective are they in getting the end result we want. And so they tried framing the entire process with sub-goals, or the entire process as one big goal, and then everything in between. What they found was that for the first 30% of the journey, you really want to focus on the sub-goals, the next milestone. But by the time you get 80% of the way through, you have to be focusing on the end, the ultimate end of the story. You ever notice the second to last chapter of a book, you don't even notice when the next chapter starts because you're in the momentum to the end of the journey. The author of this Stanford Business School study found that when individuals are initiating a goal and derive motivation primarily from the belief that the final goal state is attainable, the structure of sub-goals enhances the sense of attainability and therefore leads to greater motivation. That's what chapters can do. They create short, achievable steps along the larger journey. And so in the beginning of your learner's journey, you want to spend more time identifying those sub-goals, those small quests that can lead to quick and easy wins. So that's the first incentive that we're going to talk about today, is chapters. And next, we're going to talk about experience points. Experience points are how we keep score in our life. To assign a value to an activity, it gives us a sense of worthiness. and value based on what we've accomplished. There's experience points in this great movie known as Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where Scott Pilgrim has to fight his girlfriend's 7 evil exes. And every time he defeats one of these evil exes, he earns some experience points. So he becomes a little wiser. And the stress that he's gone through has been transmuted into coins that he can collect along his journey. We use experience points a lot in Dungeons and Dragons, which is a role-playing game that I play a lot with my kids. You roll dice and you fight monsters and you do role-playing in grand story arcs. And that's all fun, but what my kids really like, what matters to them, is when we divvy up experience points at the end. Yeah, you got 250 experience points for defeating that goblin and 1,000 for tricking the king into believing your beguilement on him. And when you cast that spell, yeah, that was a good 600 experience points. They love that because it gives value to what they've done. It makes their stress worth it. Learning happens in an environment of high pressure and high familiarity. If there's low pressure in an unfamiliar environment, people don't really care. They just feel apathy. If you try and apply high pressure and they don't know the rules and they don't know how it works, they're going to get anxious. If you're playing a game you know really well and you know how it all works and there's low pressure, you might be comfortable. But learning doesn't happen unless you have high pressure and high familiarity. With higher stakes, there's higher risk. There's more danger. Our biology evolved to release cortisol as a response to stress so that we can handle high stakes situation with increased attention, alertness, and reflexes. But we can't stay there all the time because of this phenomenon known as Yerkes-Dodson's law. And if you continually arouse someone's attention, they're eventually going to get to a point where their performance is degraded, because they're too aroused. They're paying too much attention. They're too stressed. And so the work of experience points is to give us a mechanism to bring people up this curve and then back down. And you see this a lot in video games where you have a boss battle and you earn some experience points, and then you don't go and battle another monster. You go and you spend those points. You roll back down this hill. You take the time to interpret your experience and to award the points as you see fit. So that's the second of the 5 incentives that we're going over today, is experience points. And what I'd like to do now is take a quick break, and I'd like you to write down a list of 5 secret skills or hidden talents that you have. These can be private. You can keep these to yourself, or you can write these in the chat box if you like. But we're going to take 30 seconds, and I'd like you to write down 5 secret talents or hidden skills that you have. Wrap it up. Okay, now looking at your list, I'd like you to assign some point values. If you did these actions tomorrow, if you use these secret skills, now this is just for you, you don't have to share this with anybody else, what points would you award yourself? Be outlandish, be silly. You can give yourself 150,000 points for rubbing your head and patting your belly at the same time, if you want to, because you are awarding the points. So looking at that list, how does that make you feel? Do you want to maybe go and do some of these things just to earn these completely arbitrary points that we just made up? Yeah, this is hardwired into us. We see that we can earn a reward for doing something, even if we designate that reward for ourselves, it's a neurohack. It's a way that we can use our body's brain chemistry to incentivize the actions that we want to take. And so we're going to talk about this some more with the next incentive, which is leveling up. Leveling up is the euphoria of unlocking new abilities. And we see this in the martial arts, where there's a tradition for leveling up through the belts. And the white belt is a belt that the novice wears when they begin studying a discipline. And the story goes that you keep that belt on throughout your studies so that it begins to accumulate the dust of the road and the blood of your enemies, so that eventually, by the time you're wearing a black belt, everyone can see you as a master. And those are the two ends of the spectrum in the martial arts, is the beginner wears a white belt and the expert wears a black belt. But there's a whole lot of levels in between. Each level unlocks greater responsibility, confers greater authority, and gives people a fuller sense of self. Your reward for unlocking a new level is to become a more accurate version of your highest potential. That's why we crave it so much, because there's this ideal me inside of each of us that we're trying to become. And when we earn a level, we achieve that just a little bit. That's why levels are so effective in learning design, is because they release all these endorphins when you power up. You know, when Mario gets that magic mushroom and he becomes a bigger Mario, there's more things he can do that he couldn't do before, because they're things that only a larger Mario can do. In Dungeons and Dragons, there's this catastrophic spell called Fireball, and it can blow up a city block. And a first level wizard cannot cast Fireball. It's too powerful. You have to be 5th level to even be capable of casting this spell. So the mechanics of leveling up, it keeps the beginners from singeing their own eyebrows off. And it gives rewards along the way to incentivize you to progress. A first level wizard, when they get to 2nd level, they get some good goodies that they're excited about, but being able to cast Fireball in a few levels, it keeps their eyes on the prize. It keeps them motivated and encouraged to continue. So that is the 3rd of the 4 incentives, or the 5 incentives that we're going through today. And now we're going to talk about badges. Badges are a way to vouch for someone's credibility. Earning a badge requires accomplishment, oversight, and trust. Every badge that you earn creates a feedback loop that motivates future progression. And it's because of that dopamine button we have in our heads. When you earn a badge, it feels so good that you want to earn more. I was a Boy Scout, and we wore these sashes across our uniforms that had merit badges on them. And there were 2 ways to progress in Boy Scouts. And the first was your rank, and that's that oval patch that's on the pocket. The Eagle Scout is the highest rank. That's the equivalent of a black belt in Boy Scouts. But there's all these individual merit badges that can be earned by anyone. You don't have to be any particular rank to earn a badge. So some of the lower ranking Boy Scouts could earn notoriety by studying a wide number of things and getting a lot of badges on their sash. And that badge, it used something known as the SCARF model. And the SCARF model was developed by Dr. David Rock in 2008. He's a neuroscientist, and he said that this acronym SCARF can help you identify ways to reward and threaten to incentivize activity. You can reward with status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And you can threaten these same things. So you can dock points from people as a threat to incentivize them to do something. But I find that rewarding people is much more effective because of this feedback loop that happens with the dopamine in our brains. And you can assign a badge to just about anything. Any activity that you want to incentivize, you can create a badge for it and then offer it to your learners. Hey, if you want to get this badge, all you have to do is do this thing. It's an easy incentive. There's a way to use open badges using the backpack protocol. I don't know if anybody here has ever done any work with open badges, but I was deep in open badge for a while. It used to be run by Mozilla, and it was an open source project, but eventually they decided to not do it anymore, and it was picked up by Badger. Badger's a company out of Oregon, and they handle a lot of the open badges on the internet. And these badges are really interesting because these are independent of any learning management system. That's why they're open badges. A lot of LMSs, you can set badges within that system, but you can't share those badges outside of the LMS. And what's interesting about the open badge protocol is that if you tried to copy one of these images and put it on your own website, anybody could look at the metadata of this image and see that it was awarded to somebody else and the date that it was awarded and a link to the credentialing authorization. That's all embedded in the metadata of this image. And so digital badges are really neat, and it's a fun technology that's got some neat things going for it. And what I like about what Badger does is they allow you to design curriculums according to badging pathways. And so you can create prerequisite activities that people have to complete in order to earn badges on their progression to a certification. It's really neat stuff. I could geek out about open badges and LMSs all day, but I won't do it today. Instead, I'm going to go on to talking about the fifth. Oh, wait, no, there was one other thing I wanted to show you. This is really cool. Before we move on, I'm going to share with you something that is an LMS it's a new one on the block, and I really like what they're doing because it has to do with what we're talking about today. This LMS is Experienceify. And Experienceify is really neat. I mean, it does a lot of the basic stuff. You can navigate through your course and do lessons and modules. And this is one of my courses. It's the Marketing Automation Planner. And you watch videos, you download the slides and audio, and they handle all the purchase and the login and everything. But what I like about what they do is down here at the bottom, they've got the checklist. These are the things that you have to do to complete this lesson. And after you complete one of these items, you hit this button, and you hear that sound, and you get some experience points. And every time you hear that sound, it goes a little deeper into your mind. So you think, man, I want to get some more experience points. I want to go on to the next lesson because the dopamine button is being hit in your brain every time you complete a lesson. And so I like what they're doing because it's a very tactile, kinesthetic way to harness the neuroscience of incentives. And so I like the way that they do it.
Kaylin, I just see Kath's put a question in the chat. Do the badges work with adults in workplaces? Do they ever? We're going to do an exercise to discuss this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and we're going to split up into pairs. And if there's nobody in your breakout room, go ahead and come back to the main session. And what I want you to do in this breakout room is to use that list that you made earlier of those secret skills or hidden talents you have. And once you have that secret skill or hidden talent, I want you to share it with the other person. The person with the longest hair goes first. Okay? Longest hair goes first. And what you're going to do is you're going to share your secret skills and your hidden talents. The other person is going to award you a title of a badge. You don't have to make a graphic, but you're going to bestow a silly title upon the other person, and as outlandish as you can get. Okay, so these do not have to be very serious. They're not meant to be. They're meant to be fun. So I'm going to create these breakout rooms after I paste the question in the chat. What silly title can you award to your partner's secret skill?
I'll give you a couple of minutes to discuss this in breakout rooms. And if there's nobody in your room, come on back to the main session. All right, Jeff, what was one of your secret skills or hidden talents?
So one of them was that I am very organized. It's a secret skill, but I'm also I'm very passionate about science fiction. So I put that on my list as well. That's a secret one. I am a good. I'm very reliable. I am confident, and my last one was that I am. I'm really good at getting things done.
Wow, that's a great list. You know, I'm going to award you the badge of the sorting dragon. You, sir, are the sorting dragon.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, no, the dragon, that makes me feel pretty good.
I've got no mates.
Hey, Angela, do you have a secret skill or a hidden talent you can share?
I can bake up a storm. I will feed everybody.
Yeah?
While I sing and dance.
While you sing and dance. I will give you the badge of the musical chef.
Oh.
You, Angela, are the musical chef.
Is that more powerful than a dragon?
Than a sorting dragon.
A sorting dragon.
So if you like, if you know how to rename yourself, you can click on that participants button in the Zoom toolbar and hover over the more button by your name, and you can rename yourself. If you want to rename yourself as your badge title, you can feel free to do that.
Where's the more button?
If you click on participants down on the bottom and then hover over your name, you'll see a blue more button on the side. And when you click that, you'll get a drop down to go to rename. And you can rename, look at that, the musical chef and the sorting dragon. Great. Did anybody else have a good badge title that you want to share?
Danny Boy Rock of Age.
What am I wearing?
Great. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope that exercise helped illustrate that, yes, grown-ups like badges. Look at the artist formerly known as Jeff. He is now known as the Sorting Dragon. And if I gave him a badge that had a dragon on it with files and he's using his claws to go through them, gosh, don't you think I could incentivize some activity with that?
I'd love it.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for playing that game with me. That was really fun. Okay. All right. I'm going to come back over to my slides here. Sorry, I'm just moving some screens around. There it is. All right. Great. Okay. So now we've talked about badges. Now let's talk about leaderboards.
Okay.
Leaderboards are how we can reward recognition with attention. By earning the top spot, you get high status, and it justifies the effort that it took for you to get there. And it also gives competitors incentive to improve, which creates a self-sustaining enthusiasm among the group. Does anybody play, do you play King of the Mountain on this side of the Pacific? Do you know this game where, you know, the big kid gets on top of the mountain and other kids come up and try and push him off? And once somebody else gets up there, everybody tries and push off that King of the Mountain. It might just be an American thing or an excuse that, you know, me and my brothers had for pushing each other around. But King of the Mountain was this game where the King of the Mountain had the top spot and everybody else wanted that top spot. And that created a continual cycle of improvement. And so I'm going to share my other screen real quick so that I can illustrate this with you. Here we go. Great. Okay, so you could see my my screen here where I'm moving things around. Everybody see that? Yeah, good. Okay, great. So in any kind of experience, whether it's a learning experience or a customer journey, you're either going to be doing well or you're going to be doing poorly at any given point in time. You're either going to be interested or you don't care. Okay, so those are the two options. You're either doing well, doing poorly, and you're interested, or you don't care. And now let's use this box again to look at what happens in every quadrant of this matrix. Now, about half of our learners are going to be laggards. Oh, don't spell it wrong while you're on the show. Geez, laggard. Sorry about that. So the laggard is somebody who isn't doing well and they don't really care that they're not doing well. Over here, where people are doing poorly, but they're interested, that's where they're diligent. And this is how we want our learners to be, is diligently improving their skills and trying to get better. People who are doing well, but they don't care, they're just idle. But the ones on the top of the leaderboard who are doing well and they're interested, they're competitive. Your top spots are always going to be competitive because they're going to be trading the top spot among themselves. So you don't really need to do too much to take care of that. But what we want to do is we want to get these laggards to become diligent. That's what the leaderboard can do, is it can incentivize people to have a great enough interest that they can improve. And it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be in the top 3 to 5 spots to be incentivized by the leaderboard. I'll show you some examples in just a minute, but I want to take note of this other quadrant over here, where people are doing well and they don't care, because these people could actually poison the learning experience. So anytime you can get these idle people to get competitive by asking them, why aren't you really at the top? You're doing so well at this. You could be in the top spot, and egg them on to improve. That's how we get people engaged. So I'll give you a couple of specific examples of how leaderboards can do this. So there's this book known as The 4 Disciplines of Execution, and it was written by the son of Dr. Stephen Covey, who wrote First Things First, and he does the Franklin Covey planners. He did the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Well, his son, Sean Covey, has been a management consultant for decades with Fortune 500 companies. And this book is the product of that work, where he identified what makes really productive teams. And he identified these 4 disciplines. And the third is keeping a compelling scoreboard, keeping it visual, where you can see your progress throughout the day. And that's what a leaderboard does. A leaderboard shows you how you're doing in relation to your peers. This is a leaderboard from an event I was speaking at last week, the World Conference for the International Association of Business Communicators. And this was their leaderboard at the end of the conference. Look at all those badges that they awarded. Each one of those badges is an activity that they wanted to incentivize. Each one gained experience points. Each one made their effort worth it. But I looked at this and I was, in 200th place or something, and I didn't really care that much. But there's another leaderboard that I really like, and this is for the National Speakers Association conference that's happening next week. And I'm not in the top 10 of this leaderboard, but when I come and I look at the leaderboard, I see right at the top where I am in the running, and I'm 18th place. And I want to highlight just this simple user experience tip, that if you can provide the individual's status right at the top, they're a lot more interested in that than where they are at the bottom. If you have to scroll down the leaderboard to even see where you rank, that's not what you came to the leaderboard for. The point of you looking at the leaderboard is to find out where you rank. And so we want to give these positive feedback loops as often as we can. I found this tweet in the wild just the other day. Corey Haynes, who's a marketer, and he runs a membership program known as Swipe Files. And he called out his top 10 users of the month. Tweeted to him on Twitter, included their handles, included a screenshot. Do you think these people are incentivized to participate in his community? Recognition rewards achievement with attention. That's the fifth of the 5 incentives that we're talking about today. But there's one other concept that I want to cover before we depart, and that's the finish line. A finish line gives us a defined destination that we're reaching towards. Having a defined destination, it allows you to focus your efforts and measure your progress. A journey of 1,000 miles is a lot easier than a journey way over there. Because I don't know how far that is. I don't know how long that's going to take, but a journey of 1,000 miles, I can measure that. I can plot that against my progress. I know when I'm halfway there. Expanding the finish line into bigger goals, it allows us to expand into a bigger self. During the summertime, I like to run, and I don't do it a lot in the winter because it's cold outside, and there's a penguin colony 5 blocks from my house. So I'm not going to go running right now. And every springtime, I start running again, and I'm way out of shape every spring when I start running again. I can usually go around the block before I'm huffing and puffing and I have to call it a day. But then the next day, I can run around the block and make it another mailbox. And then the next day, I can do a block and 2 mailboxes. And by expanding my finish line and setting a goal that's just a little bit further away, even when I'm not feeling good, when I'm tired and I'm out of breath, when I see the finish line ahead, I can push through to reach that destination. The poet Robert Browning said that man's reach must exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? Bigger goals help us expand into a bigger self. You could see this with the Apple Watch. They have, I don't have an Apple Watch, but the friends that I have that I know who have it, they really geek out on these rings. There's these 3 rings that measure your activity throughout the day. And 1 ring is for moving, 1 is for exercising, and 1 is for standing. And you set a goal for yourself for the day. I want to walk 10,000 steps. I want to stand up for 40 minutes, whatever your goals are. You set the finish line. And then throughout the day, you have this compelling scoreboard where you can measure your progress in the journey to become the person you want to become. And that's really what learning design gives us, is it gives us the opportunity to create a journey that the learner decides to undertake. So now I want to play one more game. We're going to go into breakout rooms, and we're going to do bigger breakout rooms of 2 to 3. So there might be 2, there might be 3. There's going to be a smaller number of breakout rooms. And the question that I want you to ask is, what reward or indulgence would make it worth your while to do a mundane, repetitive task for 12 hours? So I want you to think of a mundane, repetitive task that would be really boring. And I want you to think of a reward that would make it worth your while. What, did I hear a nomination for a good task? Okay. So the person with the longest hair is going to nominate the mundane, boring task, and then share what reward would make it worth your while. I'll see you back here in a few minutes. Magic monster. Gosh, what a great badge that would be.
Absolutely. Okay, so if I had to say what reward or indulgence would make it worth my while to do a mundane task, and I have done this before as well in different jobs. For me, it depends what drives me. At the moment, it's really quality time with my family. So I wouldn't matter what the task was, I would do it if it meant that I could have some time with my family. And that's simply because of late, I haven't spent as much time with them either, but it's something which drives me anyway. So so I go do something like, I could watch paint dry, if you like, for that amount of time. So that would be something that drives me.
Nice. My mundane task would be getting the labels off of bottles. You know how you have to scrape it really slow so it doesn't peel wrong and then get all caught? I hate doing that. But I would do it for 12 hours if I got a week-long vacation in the tropics. Like going up to Fiji and sitting in a little hut on the sand with no internet for a week. I would scrape bottles for a good long time, 12 hours. If I could get a week stay at a hut in Fiji.
I'd agree with you on that one too. That sounds really nice.
What about you, Magic Monster? Are you with us? Would you like to play this game, or are you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was just noting down my whole plan for all my courses. So a mundane activity, cleaning the house, filing at work. But I would I would do that if I could, I suppose, just go to bed early.
Like 12 hours early.
Oh, I mean, that would be a bonus for me. Yeah, thank you. By the way, really enjoying this talk.
Oh, good. Great, I'm glad. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, I've closed the room, so people will come back in about 45 seconds, and then we'll wrap up, and we should have some time for Q&A.
Sounds good.
Gosh, now I'm thinking extra sleep would be really good. Might want to change mine to being asleep in a hut in Fiji for a week.
I can visualize it, Kaylin. I can see it. Yeah.
Hot sand and unconsciousness. Gosh.
Yeah, it's a good combination. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny what we think is really indulgent as we get older. Once you have kids, it's like, oh, I can stop. But when you're in your, teens and 20s, the idea of, what incentivizes you is these big, big explosions of energy. And then when you get older, it's the opposite. You want to pull it back in. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for playing that game. If you have anything that you want to share of a fancy indulgence or a really boring task, go ahead and feel free to put that in the chat box. We're going to wrap up in just a couple of minutes, and I'm going to stick around for Q&A. So if anybody has any additional questions, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit. All right. So Arnold Toynbee said that the supreme accomplishment in life is to blur the line between work and play. And I want to invite you to look at your learning experiences this way. How can you blur the line between a test and a game, between work and play? Because the more that you enjoy your work, the more joy that you can put into it. And that joy is going to attract others to participate in it. That's the big story, right? Because we're all on this big quest out into the great unknown. And there's adventures that we have along the way. Your learning experience is one of those adventures. If we can frame the experience for a student or an employee as a chapter on the adventure, and we use badges and leaderboards and experience points and leveling up to create compelling engagement, it's going to be just like they're in a story. The kinds of stories that we sit around a campfire and talk about generations later. That's my invitation to you, is to create an experience that compelling every time you're designing an interaction. How can you make it noteworthy? How can you provide rewards that keep people's attention? I have a practical technique that I use for doing this, and it's this customer journey workbook that I use. I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat box to a handout that has a bunch of links in it. And Jeff, if you could please share the link to this PDF with the replay, that would be great. This PDF has a number of links, Badger and Experienceify, some of the resources I went over earlier. This customer journey workbook is also linked in there. And this is a Google Doc that's based on Joseph Campbell's Journey of the Hero. Joseph Campbell was the author of the book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, the monomyth, the story behind all other stories. He's the one that tells us the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. And he saw that there was this one journey of the hero that had these 12 specific stages that people went through. And I used this to create the customer journey workbook because it was a really good framework for it. So I use this more in the marketing realm for customer journeys, but it can still be applicable to a learner journey or an onboarding sequence as well. There's also a link in there for an upcoming event I have in August. I teach a virtual host certification through eSpeakers, where I train people how to give compelling virtual meetings like this one that we've had today. It's a 2-day workshop. I've also got a 90-minute digital engagement workshop in mid-August. And this is a $50 workshop, but you can get half off by using coupon code NZATD. And the information for this is in the handout. And finally, if you'd like the slides from today, the only thing I'd like to ask is for your feedback. And so there's a link to take a survey to give me feedback on how I did in today's presentation. And if you take this survey anonymously, if you like, you can just leave anonymous feedback, and then I'll give you the slides at the end of that survey. But if you'd like to subscribe to my newsletter and keep in touch, then you can fill out your email and check the box to get on my newsletter list there as well. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I really appreciate the time that you've been spending with me today. I'll stick around for a few minutes for Q&A, but if anybody needs to skedaddle, I totally understand. Thanks so much for spending this time with me today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kaylin. There's some, fantastic stuff in there. So as I said at the beginning, I will be emailing out to everybody, both the link, if you haven't got it already, for both all the resources, including the survey and the presentation slides. And also, this is recorded, so I will send you to the link to the recording. And so you'll have that as well, and it will be going up for members for NZATD on our website as well. But if you have any questions, we'll stick around for a few minutes. Otherwise, if you don't, then great to have you here for this webinar, and thank you. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event or webinar. But yeah, have a great evening for those that are leaving us now.
I'm going to be lazy and not put it in the chat. I'm just going to...
Let's do it verbal, artist extraordinaire.
Yes, yes. Oh, hi, musical chef. So,
Hi,
yeah.
artist extraordinaire. I'm going to remember that next time I see you.
So, I have to admit, partway through, I got real cynical and thought, this is a load of rubbish. And by the end, I was thinking, how can I put this into practice in my workplace? Because it sounds good. So I don't know what you did, but you worked some magic in my head because you got me on board. So thank you. I'm going to look at your resources and stuff. So
that's great. I'm really glad you were able to go through that turnaround. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
I think that happened at about the time that I think we were both typing a question at about the same time, Kath, and it was around for me, where things came unstuck a bit for me is around leaderboards, when you're trying to create an inclusive, supportive culture where actually we're all working in together and it's not a competitive environment. And, you know, that's really hard to do in a workplace. And by the way, you're at the bottom of the board, and the only way you can improve your performance is to knock someone else out. You know, I need to get my head around how that becomes a we activity as opposed to a me over you kind of activity, or you beating me, or there is so-and-so pulling up the bottom, and then the incentive for them to get off the bottom is actually pretty darn low. Or no, that might be slightly higher than being second to bottom, where all you think is, hey, at least I haven't lost, you know. But I'll never make it to the top. And that's where I started thinking and overthinking and put in that question, and just wondered about your thoughts with that now.
Yeah, well, you know, what's so interesting is there always has to be somebody at the bottom of the leaderboard. And so the real interesting challenge is, how could we keep everyone engaged, even the ones at the bottom? And so this has me thinking of unique kinds of badges. You remember at the beginning when we were playing that movie trivia game, and then I arbitrarily gave Vanessa an extra 10,000 points?
Yeah, I was ready to type why, because I was second to last there to reply.
Yeah.
And she got the bonus, but nothing.
If we quantify rewards and we do them unfairly, it rocks the boat. But if we don't quantify the rewards, if we provide unfair rewards that are qualitative, you know, you are the best musical chef in this meeting, hands down. I think we could give you that award, and you're the king of that mountain. So even if the leaderboard measures one set of metrics, there's some other way to measure the laggards so that they can be the best at something, and you can award them a special kind of badge that only they can earn. And you can create the badge just for them. You notice something that they do, or some aspect of their character, and then create a badge in the LMS and award it to them. Then even if they have the lowest number of points, they have this unique badge that gives them recognition.
So do they see through that?
Some do.
Yeah.
Some do and appreciate it, because they see that you're making an effort to engage them. And ultimately, even when we're resistant to participating, we still want to be included. You know? And so, yeah, sometimes there will be resistance, but you can also use that resistance to say, come on, chum, let's do this together.
The phrase that comes to mind, I'm a teacher, and that's my background, so primary teaching, and the thing that always comes to mind, sure, there's heaps of positive reinforcement. When you're working by distance, you don't lay it on thinly, you lay it on with a trowel, you throw it on there, that's fine. But it still has to be sincere, and it's got to be targeted. So a number of things. But the phrase that comes to mind is certificates for breathing. So there's not sort of, here's an arbitrary award. Hey, yay, thank you for coming today. You get a certificate, or you were breathing today. And kids see through that, and adults are definitely going to. And that's where I just wondered about the certificates for breathing. Here's your special award just for you.
Gosh, you bring up
in an adult environment, because kids,
Yeah.
they see through it, and even very, very young, they know, even though they like the shiny, whatever it's going to be, they like that, but then they know they actually haven't earned it. It's just a certificate for breathing.
Well, they haven't earned it because everybody breathes. But
Yeah.
if you can identify a certificate for something that only they do, fastest walk to school along, this particular road, best hairstyle, coolest shoes. You can create an award for anything, but the more unique it is, the more that they're going to value it.
Okay. I need to do a bit more thinking on that one. Yeah.
Gosh, great question.
Yeah, I just wonder, just sorry to jump in there and add something
please.
to that. I just wonder, because I've, been on a learning journey, this past 12 months or whatnot, and I've found that when I learn and understand things better, I'm more engaged and, want to, give something a go. So for those that are at the bottom, I'm just wondering whether, in understanding what are the tools or resources that they might need to help them, in their engagement journey. I'm just wondering if, there's another sort of way about it, rather than just giving a certificate for breathing, but sort of just really understanding, what are the resources of things that they might need, to hook in their engagement.
Great question, Sarah. I would start with the type of learner that they are. As you probably know, there's 50% of people are visual learners, and 40% of people are audio learners, and 10% are kinesthetic learners. And I happen to be a kinesthetic learner. And so I'm always gravitated towards the types of games that are kinesthetic in nature. And so I would start with, what kind of learner is this child or is this student? And then what game would they enjoy that could then be applicable towards the material we're trying to teach? And you can add a few steps in there. First, how about a good game? Like when I was a kid, a teacher gave me a drum machine game, and I was happy. All my behavior problems went away because I could just hit these buttons and make these sounds happen. And then he applied it to math about 45 minutes later. After I'd been having fun and really getting into it, he illustrated some mathematical concepts that were avoiding me. I wasn't able to get them, so I was totally tuned out of the class and I didn't care. But then he gave me a game that worked with my learning style. And then after I had spent a lot of time just having fun, he showed me how to apply the mechanics of the game to an educational experience. And I was totally engrossed. So that's a pathway you could look for, is what's a game that this student would really enjoy? And then how could I translate the lessons of that game into what we're trying to teach? Is that helpful?
So it would have been when I was teaching. So I'm looking now saying most of us are in workplace learning contexts where there's time, there's resources, there's not necessarily knowing your learners as well as you would like to know them. I certainly don't know them as well as I would have a class in the past, where intimately this would appeal to this child or this student, and this is what you can do. So just what recommendations do you have about the workplace?
For the workplace, I always default to games. If I need to get somebody interested, I start with a game. That's why we played a lot of games today. It's, games are my default. So that's my bias, is how can I create a game? But the other thing that I found really effective is, how can I gather contributions? When people are asked to contribute their thoughts, their perspectives, their art, their work, it makes them feel wanted and needed. So if there was a collaborative board, for instance, like by the front of the office where everybody writes, their goal for the week, awarding some experience points for that in the LMS. Go write up your goal for the week. Hit this button in the LMS. Boom, you've got points. That could be a way to start getting them in the habit of accomplishing activities that provide rewards.
If they feel safe to do that.
Yeah.
And the other part, I'm just thinking through contributions to, say, discussion boards. I know that certain parts of my master's degree, it was you had to have at least 2 whatever. As soon as you say that, you give them the minimum, there it is, you have to contribute that, you'll get terms for this paper. And sure enough, at least 2 comments per week means that 10 past 11 on a Sunday night, someone is going to skate in with their 2 comments because they've made it, they're incentivized, they'll pass the course, and that will carry on. Now that's probably sounding quite cynical, but it's an actual experience and something that I worked really hard to try not to happen. In a way. I guess I'm looking at the game in the system, and you were talking about the cheat quadrant, if you lose, I just can't remember the other part of it, but I can see it's there. If you don't do it but still win, then you're a cheat, and that's kind of what that is. It's about, for me, it's about wanting to intrinsically motivate learners rather than the extrinsic motivator, which the research has shown that it actually can undermine motivation, full stop, especially in younger learners. And it's a misconception that you know, give them more gold stars and rewards and things, actually that can disincentivize learning. So that's what I'm trying to apply to the messages that have come from you tonight.
Well, it's an interesting
how
example
do we
that
not?
yeah.
Yeah.
I like this example that you've brought up of having to make 2 comments per week, and then you know, skating
At
in
least,
at the very
which
end.
means 2.
Yeah. So if we look back at the SCARF model, status, certainty, let me look at my notes here because I can't read them off the slides. Certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And then it has those 2 arrows, one for threat and one for reward. And right now they're commenting because of the threat. How could you get them to comment with a reward instead?
Yeah, it brings me on to one of my pet topics, which I won't get started tonight, but some in this group will know how our assessment system is the downfall of learning. And, you know, we put on false assessment criteria, motivations, and anyway, we won't get started on that one tonight, but it's exactly that same thing, the threat versus reward. And for me, the big part is the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivator, the whole, what will I get if I come, if I do this, will I get credit towards the qualification? Why do I have to be in this workshop? Do I have to do it? You know, it's always that sort of threat side of thing. And the reward is, I really want to say it out loud, and sometimes I probably do, is like, the reward is you might actually be good at your job. You might actually want to go and, you know, do something else there. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to process and have a look at, having tried unsuccessfully to introduce badging systems into a couple of organisations in the past who just said straight away, oh no, we don't need, you know, our doctors won't go for that. I thought they might have, but they probably would have if they'd had the chance. And others who just say, no, that's gaming and that's for kids. And so I didn't quite have the right arguments at the time.
Well, I like the reward that you articulated, you know, might make you better at your job. What if the ultimate reward is we want to get you beyond this job?
Yeah.
You know, the reason we want you commenting on this board is because you don't want to stay in that seat for another 30 years. This is your way out.
Yeah. Right.
If you want to move
That's
up
enough of me. Everyone else is probably going, there she goes. But
I see what you're saying. I mean, for me, the way I look at it as well, just to add my 2 cents in here, is that when it comes to learning, it is all about, as you said, Kaylin, contribution, but it's about motivation as well. And what motivates people to actually engage. And you want to look at that because people will just tick a box, as you said, and they'll do that because they have to. And that is something which we could talk about, you know, our learning system, our education system, whatever it is. But if you actually tap into what motivates them, then the engagement will go up. Because then they'll see, oh, okay, actually, this is going to be really good for me. So what's in it for me? I'm going to get this out of it. So I'm going to want to go ahead and do that. So that's where I see things when it comes to, you know, how we can really get people involved and engaged in learning. It's not about ticking boxes, and we're very good at that, I know, but that's just my 2 cents.
And that's the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So
Because when you've got you've got a bunch of regulatory, compulsory, you have to complete this. It's a whole bunch of, we have a legal requirement to, you need to learn this information. That's something that's a little like, the law doesn't care whether you had a good time or not.
I like that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult if you're trying to present some very, very dry information. And yes, like I'm all about the badges and stuff. I think that would be great. And if I could grind through, like in the games, you've just got to grind through these modules. But it's like,
That's awesome. Anyway, I might see if we can just wrap it up there. I mean, I know that we can have a really long discussion about this, but you know, I appreciate that everybody wants to get on with their evening. But thank you, because this is all going on the recording, by the way, because this discussion I think is really interesting, and it may spark other discussions. But Kaylin, thank you for letting us tap your brain for a little longer tonight. And like I said, really appreciate your time and also your insights on this subject.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed this time that we spent together today.
Awesome. All right then. Well, we'll end it up there. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll, like I said,
hold
we'll see you.
Hold on, before you go. Sorry, Rosie just wants some real names.
Yeah, everybody's got their fun titles, and I want to know who I just spent time with.
Let me just
Angela
change.
from Wellington.
Let me change my name.
Yeah.
Because you know, you might want to see it for real.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I gotta look back.
You'll see me as well, Rosie. I'll be sending the email, so it'll have my surname and all my details on it. So yeah.
And if you're in Wellington, you'll see. Well, you can see us at the next event, because the next one's mine that I'm organising. So yeah. Here we are.
Cool.
Right.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
everyone.
Kaylin.
Thanks,
Okay.
Kaylin. Really enjoyed it.
Bye.
Good night.